We are T-minus 4 days from the NHL Trade Deadline, and we are taking a look at some other potential New York Ranger targets. We're focusing in on Alex Tuch, a hard-nosed veteran, and a right winger from a rival team.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1018 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, obviously, we are right on the verge of the NHL Trade Deadline, a little bit less than, 4 days away at this point. And obviously, the Rangers haven't made any moves yet. A couple of in-house in-season contract extensions, but as far as trades are concerned, nothing as of now. But I figure it's as good a day as any to talk about a couple more different Ranger trade targets, guys that I think could potentially be a good fit for this team. We'll talk about how realistic it might be that the Rangers land these players, what it might cost in some cases as well. And there's a rumor picking up some steam recently that the Rangers are in contact with the Buffalo Sabres about Alex Tuch. Now, I am somewhat skeptical that the Sabres will even be willing to trade him unless they get an absolute haul in return. And part of the reason, though, that the Rangers are targeting Tuch, I do want to cover this point of it as well. It sounds like the Ducks have a very, very high asking price for Frank Vatrano, and they're not wrong for that. I mean, it is a seller's market. They're looking to take advantage of that. And when you look at what Frank Vatrano has done this season, you factor in the fact that he has another season left on his contract after this one. You got to figure that, again, his asking price will indeed be very high, especially since the Ducks, they're not in a situation where they obviously have to trade him and no other questions asked. They have to move him. They can hang on to him through the deadline and into next season if they'd like. But as for Tuch, 27 years old, he can play left wing or right wing. Always nice to have that versatility, although with the Rangers, got to believe he would be ticketed for right wing. He's a former first-round pick by the Minnesota Wild back in 2014. He went number 18 overall. He only ended up playing in 6 games with the Wild, traded to the Vegas Golden Knights, and he did all right there, but maybe not quite the production that they were anticipating from a former first-round pick. He ends up in 249 games with the Knights, getting 139 points. That's over the span of 4 seasons. But he has found over the last couple of years a new level since being traded to the Buffalo Sabres. He has played 179 games with Buffalo, has 65 goals, 92 assists, so 157 points in 179 games with the Sabres. He's also a plus 11 in that time, 155 block shots, 135 hits, 157 takeaways against 86 giveaways. And with Buffalo, Tuch right now currently listed as their top line right winger. He's been playing on a line with Jordan Greenway and Tage Thompson. And you got to figure if he is acquired by the Rangers, and I do think that's a long shot, more on that in a second. But if he is acquired by the Rangers, got to figure he'll remain in that same role. The Rangers have obviously tried just about everybody on that top line. Kakko, Wheeler, Brodzinski, Vesey, multiple stints for both Kakko and Wheeler. It's really been a revolving door. Nothing is really stuck. And I think Tuch is somebody that would bring more offense than any of those players that I just mentioned. So he would probably be the best choice. And of course, Blake Wheeler no longer a choice because, again, he is out for the season. And the daily disclaimer here, talking about this top line for the Rangers, yes, I understand. Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider not having their best season at 5v5, and certainly some of the blame for the lack of offense from that top line falls on the two of them. It's not just whatever player happens to be out there with them at top line right wing on any given night. But with that said, maybe Alex Tuch is somebody that could help them out a little bit. if they get Alex Tuch and that doesn't work, sooner or later, it is time to split up Mika and Kreider at 5v5. But that's a different conversation for a different day. I do want to see what the Rangers do at the deadline. And if they do bring in, a top 6 kind of right winger, I want to at least see that player get a chance with Mika and Kreider. But if that line continues to scuffle even after that, then again, I think at a certain point, you've got no choice. You do have to break them up in one way or another. Something else about Tuch, he's also on Buffalo's top power play unit. He's got two power play goals and 6 power play assists on the season. I would imagine that with the Rangers, he's not going to be on the top unit. They tend to keep those 5 together no matter what. Different coaches have come and gone, but it's always those 5. And of course, if you want to go all the way back to Quinn, it was Strome that was there. Trocheck took his place ever since, Strome left and Trocheck came in. But yeah, even with Laviolette, they tried that thing where they were mixing and matching the power play units. It lasted for all of like 1 power play or maybe 2 power plays. And the very next game, they were back to, the same units that they always tend to roll with. But as for Tuch, yeah, he's not cracking that top unit, but I do think he would be on the second unit, probably in place of, I would think, maybe Johnny Brodzinski. Never know for sure, but I would imagine that that's whose spot he would probably be taking. He's also currently a member of Buffalo's second penalty kill unit is Alex Tuch. And, he could be in the mix there for the Rangers as well. It's something that we've been talking about as we've looked at different trade targets, trade candidates for the Rangers, is that, they're a pretty good penalty killing team. They were top 5. I don't know if they're still in that, area, but they're right there, even if they're not. And they've got a lot of very capable, very solid penalty killing forwards on the Rangers. But as we know, never hurts to add another one, especially for playoff hockey when penalty killing just becomes paramount to success. It's very difficult to make a big time run at it and ultimately be the last team standing if you're just not a good penalty killing team. So adding another good penalty killer, that does help as well. But there are some hurdles when it comes to the Rangers acquiring Alex Tuch from Buffalo. I mentioned that very briefly just a second ago. But first and foremost, the cap hit. After this year, Tuch will still have 2 more years left on his deal. And I know some Ranger fans want them to try to acquire somebody that won't just be here as a pure rental. So with Tuch, you would get your wish. But the problem is that he's got an annual cap hit of $4.75 million, which is obviously a lot. It would also be, a good chunk of change for the Sabres to like retain half of that if you're thinking of going down that road for another couple seasons on top of this one. I'm not so sure that they would be willing to do that. Might depend on what the return is, obviously. But the Rangers won't be able to add him this year without either Buffalo retaining salary, which again, I don't know that they would want to do that given the fact that there's 2 more years left on his deal after this one. It's one thing if it's just for the rest of this season, but there's 2 more years on top of that. So you could try to get them to do that, or you could try to shed some payroll if you're the Rangers, either as part of this deal, you send a contract back the other way to Buffalo, or you make some other deal that opens up a little bit of cap space. Anything is possible, but they're going to have to do something. They're going to have to, I don't want to say twist themselves into a pretzel, but sort of, yeah. I mean, they're going to have to make some moves where they adjust and, obviously figure out a way to fit in his contract onto the team this year and under the salary cap. And the other thing, and this is even bigger than any salary cap issues, is that I don't think it would be cheap to acquire somebody like Alex Tuch. First of all, Buffalo basically just got him. He was a big part of the Jack Eichel deal back in November of 2021, so it wasn't that long ago. The Sabres sent Eichel and a 3rd rounder to Vegas in exchange for Tuch, Peyton Krebs, first rounder, and a 2nd rounder. And so far for Buffalo, Tuch has been the best part of that trade. Now, of course, Krebs is still young. The 1st and 2nd rounder, I mean, they're both very young as well. So who knows? Maybe all those players end up working out. But for right now, the guy that gave them an immediate return on that Jack Eichel trade was Alex Tuch. And so you just wonder, like, why would they even be looking to get rid of him or trade him? Obviously, it doesn't hurt to listen to offers, but he signed at a pretty reasonable price, and he's under contract for 2 more years, and Buffalo is getting a little bit better. They're not that high in the standings, and they're falling out of the playoff race, and what else is new? But they're in a better place, are the Sabres, than they've been in a very long time. So I just don't see them doing that. I just don't know what the benefit would be. I don't know how you trade away Alex Tuch if you're Buffalo and bring back whatever and feel like you're in a better spot. Again, unless there's a king's ransom, but I just don't think the Rangers would be willing to give them a king's ransom. Now, could somebody like Capo Caco be in play? It's at least possible. And I do think that of all the different, mock trades that fans have been throwing out there, this one probably makes more sense from the Ranger perspective than any of the others. Like, because I see like these mock trades where it's like, oh, I'll give away Caco and a 1st round pick to the Ducks in exchange for Vatrano and Henrique. And I like Vatrano and Henrique, but to me, that feels like a little bit too much. Henrique is going to be your third line center for half a season and most likely be on his way. And Vatrano's great, but he's also having a career year this year. There's no guarantee that he keeps that up next season. So that does feel like kind of a lot. But if you're going to give up Kakko for somebody like Alex Tuch, who is young, seems to get better and better every single season, you've at least got my attention. I really don't want to see the Rangers trade Kakko, but if it was going to happen, a deal like this, I think would make more sense than some of the others that have been kind of floating around on social media. Some of the rumors that are mostly fan created. The other thing of note here is that Tuch is in the 5th year of his 7-year deal that he signed back in 2018 with Vegas. And it must be said that beginning this year and for the rest of this contract as well, Tuch has a modified no move clause where he can block trades to up to 5 different teams, which is weird. That's like the lowest amount of teams I've ever heard as far as like partial no move clauses are concerned. But be that as it may, he can block trades to 5 teams. And we just hope that the Rangers aren't one of them if this deal is even going to happen. But again, I really like Tuch. If the Rangers, if they can get him at anything even resembling a reasonable price, I think maybe it's worth it. Very well-rounded player, does a little bit of everything to help you win. And again, a guy that just continues to get better and better and better. But there seem to be a lot of hurdles. We mentioned the cap hit. We mentioned the fact that the Sabres are going to be asking for a big return, presumably. And again, I just don't know why they would want to trade him. So unless you knock their socks off with a big-time offer, I just don't see it happening. And but we'll see how it goes. You never say never. We've certainly learned that over the years when it comes to trades and whatnot. But again, from the Sabres perspective, I just don't see how it makes a lot of sense to move on from Alex Tuch at this deadline. But we're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I do want to first let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Sleeper. We are past the halfway point of the season, Ranger fans, and obviously it's been a good season so far, basically coast to coast on top of the Metro Division. But regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our #1 choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Panarin or Kreider or Lafreniere or Trocheck will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Ranger fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper, so start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you will get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleepers, terms of use for details and locational availability. All right, we also would just like to let everybody know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep everything rolling here. Want to turn our attention to another player, a hard-nosed veteran player, and somebody that has recently been connected to the Rangers as well. We're going to stick with the Buffalo Sabres. I mean, I don't know. Would they be willing to do a deal with the Rangers? That remains to be seen. But the player we're going to talk about is 35-year-old Kyle Okposo. And once again, another player to whom the Rangers have recently been linked. Again, hard-nosed, gritty player. But, you go from talking about Alex Tuch to talking about Kyle Okposo. There is a little bit of a drop-off there. I mean, we have to be honest. But it's also very obvious that Kyle Okposo would cost a heck of a lot less to acquire by the Rangers than would Alex Tuch. And to kind of just, talk about Okposo here from every possible angle. He's currently the Sabres captain. He is on the last year of a deal that carries a $2.5 million cap hit. And given his age and just the way everything stands, you got to figure if the Rangers brought him in, he would be a true blue rental for the New York Rangers. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's weird. I still think of Okposo as an Islander, even though he's been with the Sabres for the past 8 years. It just kind of, certain players you just kind of associate with certain teams. And obviously he hasn't played with the Islanders in a really long time. But be that as it may, that's kind of where my mind goes whenever I hear of Kyle Okposo. He is a one-time All-Star back in 2013-14. And for his career, 1,043 games, 242 goals, 372 assists, 614 points. He's a minus 134, averaging 16 minutes of 59 seconds of ice time for his career, 437 block shots, 936 hits, 560 takeaways against 500 giveaways. And this year with the Sabres, nothing that's going to blow your mind in terms of offense, but 59 games for Okposo, 12 goals, 10 assists, 22 points. He's also a +2, averaging 13 minutes and 33 seconds of ice time. He just can't handle, I don't think, the amount of ice time that he probably used to be able to earlier in his career. I mean, that goes without saying. Guys get older and their ice time reduces. Also, 34 block shots this year, 58 hits, 19 takeaways against 10 giveaways. And the numbers, the offensive numbers, they don't sound great, right? 22 points in 59 games. I mean, that's like barely a third of a point per game, but that's a lot more than you're going to get from a lot of the Ranger forwards who are currently on this team. So if you just want a little bit of an upgrade offensively, you want this team to have a little bit more depth, not to mention, just kind of a blue-collar player, then maybe Okposo is somebody that you might be at least somewhat interested in. The other thing about Okposo is that, you're going to get some veteran leadership. He's had a letter on his sweater for almost all of his NHL career. It's actually kind of crazy. He was an alternate captain for the Islanders by his third season when he was just 21 years old. He remained an alternate there throughout the rest of his time with the Islanders. And then by year 2 with the Sabres, also became an alternate captain and has now been the captain for the past 2 seasons here. And as far as, what he's doing with the Sabres, the role that he's playing, he's currently on their second line, playing right wing, along with Jeff Skinner and Casey Middlestat. And, the problem with adding Okposo, I think, is just the very simple fact that, you look at what the Rangers' needs are, and the things that really tend to stand out right now are top line right wing and third line center. Maybe a defenseman too, that's also a possibility, a depth defenseman. But, top line right winger, I mean, does anybody at this point see Kyle Okposo as a top line right winger? I certainly don't. Does that mean that they wouldn't play him there? Would he get a chance with Mika and Kreider? I mean, they could do that. They could give it a shot. I mean, as we've talked about multiple times on here earlier today and really throughout the season, they've tried everybody else on that top line with Mika and Kreider. And if the Rangers are going to insist on keeping the two of them together, does Okposo eventually get a shot at it? Maybe something clicks there that hasn't with other players. I mean, who's to say for sure? But again, when you just look at Kyle Okposo, the player that he is right now and just where everything stands, 35 years old, you really want to go into the Stanley Cup playoffs with him as your top line right winger? Probably not. Now, of course, they could acquire Okposo and maybe Kakko stays with Mika and Kreider, and maybe you go with Okposo on like the third line. Maybe he's out there with Brodzinski and Cooley, or Goodrow and Cooley. It sounds like the two of them might be flip-flopping going into this game against the Panthers tonight. But bottom line, Okposo on a cup contending team, it's not like a bad acquisition if he's going to play in the bottom 6. He's got to be a bottom 6er, though. Maybe even fourth line. I mean, you could make him on the third line, too. But he can't be having a prominent role, I don't think, in a top 6 on a team that truly believes that it is all in and that is about to go on a run and win the Stanley Cup. That just seems a bridge too far for Okposo at this point of his career. Something else that I found interesting here, and I wasn't really expecting this, but then you think about it and it does make sense. Okposo, for his career, has only played in 23 Stanley Cup playoff games, and he's only been out of the first round once. Of course, obviously not all of that is his fault. The Sabres never make the playoffs. That's well documented. And the Islanders had some pretty bad teams in the years that he was there. But yeah, again, he's only made it past the first round one time. That was during his most recent run in the playoffs, which was in 2015-2016 with the Islanders. So it's been a while, and in 23 playoff games, 7 goals, 8 assists, 15 points, and is a -3. But for somebody that's been around so long, you would expect maybe a couple more Stanley Cup playoff games. The other thing here is that the Sabres don't really have to trade Okposo. He is in the last year of his deal, but he, this past offseason, had just finished up a 7-year deal with Buffalo and then agreed to a 1-year extension with them for $2.5 million. So they could do something similar this offseason as well. And I found this interesting. There was an article that mentioned that this past offseason, and this might have been out there, I just don't happen to remember it, but apparently Okposo this past offseason told the Sabres that he was either going to re-sign with Buffalo or he was going to retire. So that I found that interesting. Obviously, he chose to keep playing, and obviously him and the Sabres were able to reach a deal. But I just wonder, Okposo right now, even though the Sabres are very likely going to miss the playoffs, is he somebody that wants to be traded? Would he rather just finish out the rest of the season with them and then maybe look to re-sign with them again for another year like he did this past offseason? And if he does get traded, would he be all that happy about that? I mean, I would think, I can't speak for Kyle Okposo, and everybody's different, but I would just think that somebody that's 35 years old, and I mentioned he's only played 23 career Stanley Cup playoff games, somebody with that kind of resume, I mean, wouldn't you want one more shot at it? Wouldn't you want to join a contending team and maybe get to go on a run and lift the Stanley Cup? He could come to the Rangers and complete the New York trifecta, the Islanders, the Sabres, and the Rangers, and possibly win a Stanley Cup. And what better way to go out than that? I mean, would he try to play another season after this? That's possible as well. But I get the feeling like if he was to come to the Rangers, lift the Stanley Cup, I mean, again, what better way to go out? So I don't know for sure how Okposo would feel about a trade to the Rangers, but the Rangers can do their homework there, find out how he feels about it. And obviously, if it happens, you would hope that he comes over and puts his best foot forward. And I think he would. He's a well-respected veteran player. And you got to figure at that point, I mean, hey, empty the tank and do everything you can to try to win a Stanley Cup, getting toward, the twilight of your career here. As far as the Rangers trading for Okposo, I can live with it if the price is right. But he's not somebody that really moves the needle for me all that much. As a depth forward, he's fine. But I don't want to see the Rangers, trading away a second-round pick and like a Brett Berard kind of a prospect to bring in Kyle Okposo for half a season. That just wouldn't really make a lot of sense. But if you can do something like what the Rangers did for Vetrano a few years ago when they got him for just a fourth rounder, if you can throw out like a fourth-round draft pick, bring in Kyle Okposo, I'm cool with that. I do think he'd be a little bit of an upgrade to some of the forwards that are currently in the lineup. He's got better offensive numbers than a lot of the Ranger depth forwards. And I would imagine if he came over, you'd probably see maybe Adam Edstrom is the odd man out of the lineup. Hard to say for sure, but again, it's a situation where very simply the price has to be right. You can't be overpaying for 35-year-old Kyle Okposo, but if you can get him for next to nothing or something, fairly limited, then okay, I'm cool with that. You just hope that it's not the biggest move that the Rangers make at the deadline. If Kyle Okposo is the biggest move, then it's not that exciting of a trade deadline for the New York Rangers. But obviously, we'll see how everything shakes out. And in just a second, we're going to continue. I want to shift our attention to a veteran, I mean, sort of a veteran, kind of like in the middle of his career, I guess you could say, but a winger that plays for a Ranger rival that could make some sense, and there's a very good chance that he could be on the move before the deadline happens. And we will get to that player in just a second. First, though, we definitely would like to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at all the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's go ahead and talk about one more player today, and that is going to be 29-year-old Anthony Mantha, left winger and right winger for the Washington Capitals. A couple of you guys in the comment section mentioned him. A couple people emailed me as well, and he looks like a player that probably will be traded. I mean, quick disclaimer here before we really, talk in detail about Mantha. The Caps aren't exactly buried the way that some other teams are. So there's 7 points out of the second wild card, but they do have 3 games in hand on Tampa. Now, of course, those games in hand are only good if you win them, but they're within striking distance. And they're actually a little bit closer to third place in the Metro Division than they are to the second wild card. They are 6 points behind the Flyers, and they have 2 games in hand on Philly. But even still, you got to figure these guys are open for business. They'll listen to some offers, and he is one of actually several impending UFAs for the Washington Capitals. And honestly, he's not the only one that the Rangers could be in on. You've got guys like Joel Edmondson, Nicolas Aube-Kubel. I always butcher that spelling. Aube-Kubel. I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments section. So you got those two. You've got Max Pacioretty. Pacioretty is somebody that's always been kind of a personal favorite of mine. I mean, it helps the fact that I was fortunate enough to get to interview him a while back. He's from Connecticut, and he comes back and does like sports camps, hockey camps with some of the young players. So it's always cool that he does that, but always, really nice guy and somebody that's an absolute sniper. I mean, he can absolutely let the puck fly. The only thing that kind of scares me there is that, he's had some injury issues over the past couple of seasons. And that being the case, there's no guarantee that he would hold up even for the rest of the regular season, much less, hopefully, a very deep playoff run as well. But Pacioretty's still at least somewhat intriguing to me. And Nick Dowd, he's not on an expiring contract, but we talked about him a few episodes back as well. So the Caps have some guys that could be had and a couple of different guys that I think could be of use to the New York Rangers. But we'll, for this episode, really focus it on Mantha here. 5.5 seasons for Mantha with the Red Wings, followed by 3.5 with the Caps. 476 games, 139 goals, 147 assists. He's a -25, 210 block shots, 451 hits, 193 takeaways against 292 giveaways. He is having one of his better seasons this year. He's played in 56 games. He's got 20 goals. That's already the third most of his career. His previous career high total was 25, so he could easily eclipse that. 14 assists, 34 points, 21 block shots, 31 hits, 21 takeaways against 18 giveaways. And he's been hot lately as well. So you got to figure that teams, looking to add, he's got to be catching their eye at least a little bit. I'm sure the Caps are happy about this because, first of all, he's playing better. But secondly, if they do move him, maybe that allows him to get just a little bit more for him. But in his last 4 games, Mantha's got 2 goals and 3 assists. Right now with the Caps, he's playing on their third line on the right wing. He's playing with Connor McMichael, as well as another name that I'm not going to be able to pronounce very well, Alex Protas. I think I got that. Also on the power play unit is Anthony Mantha. And you got to figure that he would probably step into the second power play unit with the Rangers. But when it comes to 5v5 play, again, with the Capitals right now, he's on the third line. He might move from a non-contending team or a team that's on the outside of the playoffs looking in, I think is the best way to put it. But he might go from a team like that to a contending team, a team flirting with the President's Trophy and hopefully about to go on a long playoff run. He might go from the former's third line to the latter's top line. And that would be a heck of a jump for Anthony Mantha. And again, we've been talking about this on and on, but that top line right wing spot, if the Rangers were to acquire Anthony Mantha, I think he probably gets a crack at it. You might see a situation where, the first game or two, they throw him on the third line just to kind of get his feet wet a little bit. But if he shows any kind of, quality play as he's been doing this season, then you could see him move up to the top line with Mika and with Kreider in very, very short order. And he might stick there because, again, I think if you add a player like this, he probably is your best option in that spot. And Kakko moved back up to the top line. Quick aside here. And he's completely disappeared again. And the thing that really kind of bums me out is I was all excited, and I think a lot of you guys were too, about that third line that the Rangers put together. Left to right, you had Cooley, Brodzinski, Kakko. It was the best that any Ranger third line had looked all season. And you fast forward just a few games, and now all 3 of them are broken up. Kakko's back on the top line, and it's completely disappeared again. He's done next to nothing ever since being moved up to the top line with Mika and Kreider. So you got Kakko up there, and now, at practice, it is probably what they'll do in the game tonight against the Panthers. They flip-flopped Brodzinski and Goodrow. Goodrow moves up to the third line, Brodzinski down to the fourth line. So now you've got Cooley on the third line, Brodzinski on the fourth line, and Kakko on the top line. That awesome third line that we were having so much fun watching, now completely broken up, all 3 of them on different lines. I haven't really gotten on Laviolette too much for the lineup decisions that he's made this year. Look at the Ranger record. How mad are you really going to get? I've floated the idea of breaking up Mika and Kreider, but this one just, again, it just kind of bums me out because it felt like those guys were clicking and they were starting to figure something out together, and now they're all completely on different lines. Kakko hasn't played as well. Brodzinski hasn't stood out as much recently, and even Cooley. Cooley's been a very consistent player, but I don't know, wasn't really feeling that decision to break up the 3 of them. Getting back to Mantha here, though, another point about him is he did play for Peter Laviolette, so there's some familiarity there. He actually got to the Capitals the same season that Peter Laviolette got there, and they spent 3 years together. So again, there's at least some familiarity. I would hope that, if Drury's doing his diligence on a guy like Anthony Mantha, hopefully he's got Peter Laviolette on speed dial and he can ask him about him. Would he fit here? What kind of player was he? Did he fit in well with the team? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But take advantage of that. You've got a guy that's your head coach right now that coached this guy for 3 years in DC. So obviously pick his brain a little bit and kind of determine if he's somebody that can, come to the Rangers and contribute in a meaningful way. As far as what the Rangers would have to give up for Mantha, I really like Mantha. I think this would be a really solid pickup for the Rangers. I don't also think that he would cost as much as some other potential trade targets out there, like a Frank Vetrano, for example. Mantha is a steady contributor for the Capitals, certainly this season, his best season that he's had in a while. So I don't know. What do you think? Maybe like a second-round pick and a prospect not named Brandon Othman or Gabe Perreault, and hopefully not Adam Sikora either. They're kind of the big three for me, at least. But maybe like a second-rounder and like a Brett Berard. And I hate even saying that because I'm a big fan of Brett Berard, but you got to give up something, right? So a second-rounder and Brett Berard, a second-rounder and Zach Jones, a second-rounder and maybe Matthew Robertson. I mean, these are names that might make some sense. It depends what the Capitals are looking for and how they feel about these certain players. But, you're going to have to give up something for Mantha, but I don't think it's going to necessarily break the bank. And it feels like there could be something there. There's no telling for sure if the Rangers and Caps will do business, if the Capitals will reach out and help their bitter rivals, the Rangers, but they've done deals in the past. We documented that on a recent episode. No blockbuster deals or anything like that, but this is kind of like a medium impact sort of a trade here between the Rangers and the Capitals. It's certainly not a blockbuster, but I wouldn't classify it as like a small deal either. So would they do business? Again, we have no way of knowing that for sure, but wanted to at least point that out. And one other little bit of news about, the trade deadline coming up before we call it a day here. Tommy Novak, a little bit earlier today, news breaks that he signed a 3-year extension with the Nashville Predators at $3.5 million per season. I know it sounds like the Rangers were at least somewhat interested in him. We talked about him in a recent episode. I know some of you guys were big fans of Novak as well. But unfortunately, that's no longer going to be happening. So anybody that was a big fan of Novak, unfortunately, the team's going to have to look elsewhere. And hopefully, again, the Rangers can strike a deal or two at a reasonable cost, bring in a couple players that can help between now and the trade deadline. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's at @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.